you got to talk about. Another thought I want to share with you. It came up. And this is a rational question. It could even be asked by somebody who's not particularly biased on the other side. You conspiracy theorists, or you people who think all this, how come there's so many different views? How come you don't have it together? Okay? Why aren't you unified intellectually? A couple of things then to keep in mind. First of all, we're not a tight membership union. We haven't taken oaths and so on. Number two, everybody has their own beliefs and thoughts, and they're entitled to that. And as far as some of the beliefs and theories are concerned, many of which, frankly, I think are ludicrous, but, I think it's an Arabic saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So in one sense, I don't give a damn. You want to have 16 shooters from the top of another building, coming out of sewers and hanging from parachute lines and so on? Fine! In that sense, you know what I mean? I realize, maybe you give the rest of us who are a little bit more serious a bad name, I don't know. But for openers, that's okay. But then I said, well, how can there be people of disparate beliefs, and doesn't that in some way dilute, doesn't that in some way refute your conspiracy theory? And a thought just came to me, not at that moment, thought just came to me. You can use that same argument about the existence of a deity, a God, if you are religious. Catholics believe this, Protestants believe that, Jews, especially Orthodox Jews, believe this. How about Muslims? How about Buddhists? Okay? Well, gee, you got all these different views. Doesn't that prove that there is no God? Right? If you believe this and you believe that, there's no goddamn God, right? Everybody's different views. I think that that's a very apt analogy. So then, on the investigation and things, when you get into the investigative, analytical, political field, think about it. Even today, this year, you have many people, I don't know, I have no way to keep track, many people on the other side of that minority who believe that while the commission's conclusions are right, they acknowledge the superficiality, the ineptitude, the inadequacy of the Warren Commission. Hammer that. Point out what a sloppy job they did. An investigation of a murder case of a non-entity. You, me, your next door neighbor, the guy down the street. There's no way that it would be handled, especially in a metropolitan area. And then when you get into somebody who's a celebrity, who's a major figure. This was an investigation. Just look at Jack Ruby. Michael Bodden again repeated today about Jack Ruby just sending money via Western Union to his a former stripper, and then he walks across the street, and lo and behold, there's the ramp into the basement of the Dallas Public Safety Building. I said, Michael, you're a little bit behind the times. It's now a pretty documented fact that a high-ranking Dallas police official let him in through the basement door. That is just an example of the kind of thing that the Warren Commission failed to deal with. The whole story about Jack Ruby, beginning with little Jacob Rubenstein, 17-year-old kid, he's already mafioso in Chicago. He's a pimp, he's a nightclub owner, he's a hustler, he's a gun smuggler, he's a police informant, he's an FBI informant. David Runyon on LSD could not have created the character of Jack Ruby. Where the hell does this all come from? Yeah, he just happens to casually walk across and says, gee, I can't stand the idea of Jackie Kennedy going in to a courtroom and having to deal with this, so I'll take care of it. These are the kinds of things. How about Lee Harvey Oswald living 2.5 years in Russia, marrying the niece of a KGB colonel. I went to Russia in 1973. Dr. Tom Noguchi, my dear friend, the LA Coroner Medical Examiner, and a couple of other friends of college, we were there for 10 days visiting our colleagues in Moscow and Leningrad. I wasn't in my office for 3 days before 2 FBI agents came in, not menacingly. They really wanted to know, what did I hear, what did I see, what did I think, whom did I talk to? In 1973, after 10 days of a professional forensic pathology meeting. But back then, Lee Harvey Oswald, 2.5 years in Russia, married to the niece of a KGB colonel, and they didn't give a damn. Okay? These are the kinds of things that you've got to think about. These are the things that audiences, that people relate to, because they're common sense. The whole concept, and then, then more, of course, on the forensic scientific aspect, the acoustical evidence, the photographic analysis, which some of my colleagues have handled so brilliantly, etc. And of course, the problem that existed that forced them to come up with the single bullet theory. Which, of course, and keep this in mind, and hammer this point, it is a sine qua non of the Warren Commission report's conclusion vis-a-vis a sole assassin. It's like pregnancy, baby. You are pregnant or you are not pregnant. You cannot say, well, maybe the single bullet theory is not quite correct or so on. And then I've heard this from a few people too, including national broadcasters who have come on in support of the Warren Commission. Probably, most likely, with regard to Oswald. That's not what the Warren Commission says. And you've got to hold their nose to the ground. You've got to hold their feet and fingers to the fire. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone from beginning to end. There was no input by anybody going in the execution or the coming out. All by himself. Hammer that. And make that clear. What about his gun? What about the cartridges and so on? My God, there's not a person in this room. If you had enough, just a little bit of money and a little bit of time, if you wanted to frame somebody, just think. How difficult would it be for you to work it out one way or another? You get the gun, you have him get the gun, you get hold the gun, what do you think of it? Line up, you get the fingerprints, and then you shoot, and you got a bullet conveniently found on a stretcher at Parkland Hospital, and you match it up the right way. That's no big deal. That's not something that is great, fantastic work. That is so simple to accomplish. Any intelligent little cabal, an individual could do that, given enough time. Well, these are the things to think about. And so, in closing, I just want to tell you, when you're asked the question then of why, you're asked a couple of questions. Who did it? And why did they do it? And just hammer, I talked about already, about what was going on in the world. John Kennedy said to Senator Mike Mansfield, then Democratic leader of the United States Senate, as he tore up a piece of paper, I don't know what was on it, presumably a memo of some kind, dealing with one of the Cuban fiascos, and he said, as he threw them into the air, this is what I intend to do with the CIA. The military-industrial complex, we're going to pull out of Vietnam. You're talking about tens, hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, I'm not suggesting that they sat around in a huge group. I would be willing to bet if God would give them the answer, there weren't 6 people there. 4, 5, 6 who made that decision. The point is that the concept, the idea, the milieu, the intellectual fertility, the grounds upon which this was based emanated from those kinds of people. And then finally, what is the purpose of all this? Why do you continue to talk about this 50 years later? We owe this to ourselves. We owe this to our children. We owe this to our grandchildren. An unresolved murder. I just testified in a murder case last week, 35-year-old murder case, and there was for the prosecution, and I just learned this afternoon there was a conviction. I don't take any joy in that, but the point I'm making is this is a routine case in a county next door to mine, Allegheny. Nobody gives a damn. 35 years ago, but the prosecution did what they felt they had to do, and they came to me and asked me to put it together for them and so on. So these kinds of things are taking place. Cold cases all the time. That's a hot item on television. It's a hot item in real life. Young detectives, a young forensic scientist who are going to make a name for themselves. I'm going to get this case that has dust on it and mold, and I'm going to show that it can be solved. Okay? But it's interesting. You can do that, and the challenge is there for Jones and Brown and Smith and everybody else, but not for the President of the United States. That we don't give a damn about.
Wow.
This is an open case, my friends. It has to be open. It can be resolved. There's no question about it. And what was the reason for this happening? And what is the reason that we must pursue this again? It happened because they could not stand 5 years of John followed by 8 years of Bobby. That's a political evolution, 13 years in the lifetime of the country. It was a person, it was in the form of John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy. You could not beat at the polls, the charisma, the charm, the money, the support from all of the groups. No way in the world. There's only one way to get rid of people like that, and you're not going to do it at the polls. Not a ball game. Ninth inning of the baseball game, third period of the hockey game, second half of the basketball. Wait until it's our turn. This is real life. And so you do that by assassination. And everywhere in the world, it is labeled for what it is, except in America. What it was the overthrow of the government. It was coup d'etat in America.